Hello, Dr. Flavio here. It is an honor to spend a moment with you and share an idea that will change your life forever and that of your family for the better forever. This is really, really important. Perhaps one of the most important things that all of us human beings deal with. And this is this idea of connection. You know, the relationship between parents and children is very delicate, particularly as they grow older, because children are developing their own independence. They want to go about the world and their lives on their own, so they're working with their independence. And at the same time, that independence requires a sort of a break or a distancing from their parents. But at the same time, if they don't feel connected to their parents, then the situation tends to get really difficult. In fact, research shows that boys who don't feel connected to their parents have a higher tendency towards delinquency, and girls who don't feel connected to their parents have a higher probability of being pregnant early. So there are some serious problems there, and perhaps the saddest one is that when we don't feel connected as a teenager to our parents, we end up not really learning how to form those kinds of bonds. And later on in life, not feeling connected, not pairing up properly, not feeling properly connected to somebody else is associated with lower lifespan. In other words, we don't live as long statistically, we're less healthy, and we have worse finances. So, to put it another way, people who feel connected to another human being in a fundamental way, they end up being healthier, living longer, and being wealthier. And I think you can attest to that. If you look at your own life, the times when you felt the best and when you did the best were the times when you felt the most connected. And if you're having trouble with your teens right now, with your children or your teen, you're going to realize that you don't feel very connected, and that kind of messes up your whole day, doesn't it? So what we're here to do is turn that around for you. I have been helping families restore their sanity, restore hope, restore the greatness of their lives, the purpose for which they even became a family. And I've been doing this for many, many, many years, and it's always a joy to see a family function all over again. So it's interesting because as parents, we never quite know what to do with our children, do we? Pregnancy is difficult, birth is difficult, when they're babies, it's really difficult. Doesn't matter how many babies we've had, it's a little bit difficult because we don't quite know what to do. And a common expression that you hear among parents, no matter what their age is, oh gosh, I just wish they would come with an instruction manual. And one time I was actually reading an instruction manual for a car that I had gotten, and one of my daughters was making fun of me for actually reading the thick book, about all the different features and stuff, And I realized why children probably don't come with an instruction manual, and that's because we typically don't read them. We find it boring. So, our children themselves are the instruction manual if you begin to look at them in a different way. And that's what I want to share with you today. So let's take a look at this together. Isn't it true that when the child is born, we feel very powerful, don't we? Because here we are handed this baby, and the baby is entirely dependent on us. And we actually feel quite powerful. Their lives is in our hands. And if we don't feed it, if we don't take care of it, this baby won't make it. So we actually do feel really powerful. And as the baby begins to grow and becomes a child and begins to talk, they begin to ask us questions. And to them, we're actually kind of a god, aren't we? We know everything. We can pay the bills. We can drive the car. We are all powerful to our children. And unfortunately, because we have this human condition that basks in these types of pleasures, we end up believing the myth, and we begin to feel that we're all knowing in front of our children. And then we develop this situation where we don't know everything that we have to do, but we kind of keep up the appearances, and children begin to realize that perhaps mommy and daddy don't quite know everything, and we work really hard to keep that perception. So usually that ends up creating a situation where we have to impose discipline. You see, by the time we have to impose discipline, I'm not saying not have discipline, I'm saying by the time you have to impose discipline, something has already been lost. Have you figured that out? Discipline, when it is elicited out of the child, out of out of a commitment to a sense of cooperation to the well-being of the family, that's awesome. But when you have to actually impose by force, discipline, by then it's too late already. The problem is already huge if you have to actually impose discipline. And that's an example of a parent who is working really hard to keep up the myth, the appearance that he or she knows what they're talking about. And that's sad, because if you were to stop for a moment and pay attention to what's actually happening, I submit to you that your child is actually your teacher. Listen, we're all human beings and we're all growing. We're all on this earth to grow, to learn, to develop. And pay attention to this, if we don't know what to eat and we eat all the wrong things and we end up having a bellyache, somebody will come up to you and say, look, you ate the wrong things and that's why your belly is hurting. And in a way, you would say, okay, the pain that I'm feeling in my belly right now is a direct result of not knowing what to eat. You would acknowledge that. You would say, if I could only learn what to eat and what not to eat, my belly wouldn't hurt anymore, that type of thing. So you would acknowledge in other areas of your life that our pain or the feeling of pain is always the result of not knowing something. Well, ask yourself a question. Are you in pain right now when it comes to your children, to your teenagers? If you are in pain, does it stand to reason to you? Does it seem reasonable to believe that there are things we don't know? And if that's true, who is alerting you to the areas of your life where you need to grow a little? That child. In that way, the child is actually your teacher, alerting you to the areas of your life where you need to do some growing. So the notion that we as parents don't have to grow because we're the parents is silly. Let's not even waste time talking about that. We all have to grow up. So rather than treating our children as though they're broken or something that needs to be fixed by some doctor somewhere, rather than thinking of it that way, let's stop for a moment and ask, okay, how exactly am I hurting here and what does that mean about who I am? Is it possible that my pain is an indication of the areas in my life where I need to grow? So the more a parent hurts, you see, everything is kind of the opposite. Like they say that common sense is not very common. Sometimes a parent will come over and tell me, look, I'm suffering a whole lot. We have this problem, that problem with my son, with my daughter, And I will ask him, well, what do you think the problem is? And they will typically tell me, well, I think the problem is I just gave too much, And I never really heard of a human being who actually gave too much, considering that we're all on the selfish side, we don't really give that much as we think we do. But many parents, when they're in trouble with their children, they refer to the cause of the problem as having given too much. And I asked them, okay, how is that? What did you give that was too much? Well, I bought them this, I bought them that. So, okay, so you bought a lot of objects, you spent a lot of money, but is it possible that you're spending all this money to cover up what you're really not giving them? So, you see, we kind of cover up our own pain and we compensate for the pain in many different ways. Overbuying is just one example of it, but notice how we justify it to ourselves. I gave too much. Whenever I hear this, I already know the parent feels guilty for not having given enough attention, enough love, enough companionship, enough presence, you see? So we compensate by buying things. So pay attention to this. Later on, if that's your example, if you think you gave too much and you're now suffering, rather than continuing the mantra that you gave too much and you broke the child or the child came to you broken from the factory, rather than thinking of it that way, ask yourself, in what exact way am I hurting? And what does that inform me about what I need to learn? What can I learn from this situation? What you're going to discover is that there are areas of your life where you need to grow up. And by focusing on those areas and actually growing up, you're going to be in a position where you can actually be useful to your family, to your children. You see, everybody is going to do better together. And as a result of you growing up and becoming the parent, we can actually reconnect with our teenagers. How about that? Now, I understand this is a little weird. I understand this is totally opposite of what you ever heard, always heard. I understand that. And I suggest you listen to it again, and if you have any questions, let me know by all means, let me know what's going on with you. Let me know what the problem is, and how I can help, how I can be of service. Because if you tell me what the problem is, maybe I can offer you a couple suggestions of how to look at it that will make a difference for you. All right? Thank you so much, and blessings.